Hi everyone, and welcome to another edition of Arizona Wildlife Views. My name is Jamie Lyons, and I'm the volunteer coordinator at the Arizona Game and Fish Department. Today on Arizona Wildlife Views, we take a look at all the people and things that have come together for a successful bighorn sheep capture and relocation. Plus, we'll take you to Williams for an up-close and personal look at Bearizona and the veterinarian helping to make a difference there. We've got all that and more starting right now on Arizona Wildlife Views.
Arizona Wildlife Views is brought to you by the sale of hunting and fishing licenses and the Heritage Fund, lottery dollars working for wildlife. Some projects made possible by the Sport Fish and Wildlife Restoration Fund.
For the past several years, the Arizona Game and Fish Department has sought to restore the population of the majestic bighorn sheep. As you will see, the department's capture, relocation, and release efforts are all a part of an elaborate and cooperative partnership with department employees, our partners, and game and fish volunteers.
At first glance, it looks like a rescue or some kind of MASH unit. But upon closer inspection, the patient has horns, and it's not a rescue at all.
Today we are doing a bighorn sheep transplant within Game Management Unit 24B from a part of the unit where we have a really good healthy population of bighorn sheep into another part of the unit that had a habitat assessment done that showed that it was really good bighorn sheep habitat. We use 2 helicopters that kind of work in a team, and in those helicopters you have, of course, the pilot. We have a net gunner who is trained by our department, and they have to have a lot of experience to be a net gunner. And then we have someone up in the front by the pilot who is known as the mugger. So these 2 helicopters will go out in tandem and locate a herd of sheep, and one of the helicopters will kind of take lead position. They will get on a group of sheep and try to get one separated away from the rest of the herd. And we're targeting mostly ewes because ewes are the ones that have the babies. So those are what we want to take to our new area.
In the air above the Goldfield Mountain Range, the choppers get close enough for the net gunner to do his job.
The net gun fires, and it actually fires a square net with weights on the end. And it should wrap that sheep up, kind of tangle it up, and then the helicopter will drop down low enough that the mugger can then hop out of the helicopter and go over to that sheep, get a blindfold on it, get it so it's not going to get up and get away or hurt itself.
Once blindfolded, the bighorn sheep calms down and is transported to the processing site.
We'll get it out of the helicopter, we'll bring it over here to our wildlife health station.
It does look a little bit like a MASH unit, especially when the sheep first come in. We need to do a quick assessment. A lot of times they still have the capture net on them, and so we need to do a quick assessment, make sure everything looks pretty good while they're taking the net off. The first most critical point is to try and get a temperature on them. Taking their temperature tells us how much they may be stressed and whether or not they've overexerted themselves as far as their muscles go. And it's a critical point for things that happen after the capture that are maybe not so good. If they're too hot, we immediately try and start cooling procedures, mostly by putting cold water on them and then by providing fluids and oxygen. Whenever we get our hands on any of our wildlife species, but especially the bighorn sheep, we collect samples to assess them for health and disease. And so we're getting nasal swabs to look for bacterial infections in the throat and the respiratory tract, the lungs. and we're also getting throat swabs for the same thing. And then we take blood samples to look to see if they've been exposed to any number of different viral diseases that we have in the area.
And then once we've assessed it, it gets an ear tag so that we can identify it later as one of the animals that was transplanted. And then 5 of them today will get a radio monitoring collar, actually a GPS collar nowadays, so that we can monitor its location in its new home.
Arizona Game and Fish has all this down to a science, literally. But a lot of the hands-on help they get on the ground comes from some pretty dedicated volunteers. Volunteers who say the experience has been life-changing.
Once you get your hand on a live animal like that, it changes. It becomes very different. It's just, you feel much more a part of doing actual conservation work as opposed to just donating money. And matter of fact, I had been a hunter, and the concept of shooting a sheep now is not really a thing for me anymore, having handled them. It's just, I have a different relationship with them.
Once the bighorns are processed, it's time for the final steps to the sheep relocation.
And then we take them to our transport trailer where we load them inside the boxes that were designed for transporting bighorn sheep. And once we get the number of sheep that we were looking for this project, which is optimally between 15 and 20, then we will use the trailer, either drive them on the trailer out to where we want to release them, or in this case, depending on the number of sheep, we might actually use the helicopter to transport the boxes up to one of those water catchments that's up in the mountains and release them from the boxes at the water catchment.
Once the boxed bighorns are set in place at their new location, it's time to set them free again.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This is like a focal point in my year, but it doesn't happen very often. This is the only capture this year. But it's a big deal, so it fills in a lot of gaps for me. You've been a part of it. You've gotten your hand on a bunch of critters. You've helped keep them healthy through the process. It's a lot of fun. It feels good.
Heart and lungs sound great. Eyes look good. Squeaker works.
Caring for wildlife, whether in captivity or out in nature, requires a unique set of skills. That's why wildlife veterinarians like Dr. Ole Alcumbrac are essential to help maintain the health of these animals. Arizona Game and Fish often recruits Dr. Ole, as he's known, when they're working with native wildlife in the field. From wolf health surveys in the White Mountains to Sonoran pronghorn releases in our southern deserts, Dr. Ole and his team make sure these animals get the best possible care. Today, Dr. Ole is at the Bearizona Wildlife Park in Williams, where he visits monthly to assist their animal care staff with the medical needs of the wildlife that live there.
These are captive, but nevertheless wild animals here. And they deserve the same kind of care that you would expect your dog or cat or horse or cow, sheep, goat, pig to have. So we're here to provide them with that same level of care.
The first order of business is to relocate 2 bears to different exhibits. But first they need to be immobilized with just the right amount of sedative. Too much and you could hurt the bear. Not enough and the bear could hurt you.
So the goal of wildlife anesthesia is using a drug that's safe for the animal, safe for us, and one that's very potent, so very small doses result in a good anesthetic event, and then something we can reverse. We don't like to leave these animals asleep forever.
The first bear has been lured into a holding area so she's easy to access.
we're going to do is this bear, Dale, is going to be transferred to another exhibit, and so the staff will get her attention, and I'm going to use this pulse syringe to deliver the drug. Even though these bears are captive, they're just as wild as any bear in the world, so all precautions are going to be taken that no one gets hurt, and she does well in the process.
After the drugs take effect, Dale is weighed and given a quick health assessment to make sure she doesn't have any other issues before being moved to her new enclosure.
She's doing great. She's got a blink reflex still. She's just heavily sedated. This combination of sedatives we're using is not necessarily an anesthetic, but just a really potent sedative.
Once Dale is safely relocated and recovered from her sedative, it's on to the second bear. This one is out in a large, multi-acre drive-through exhibit.
In this next bear that we need to mobilize, apparently these two bears have been picking on another bear, so we are going to separate the bullies, because bullying isn't even allowed in bears, and we're going to dart these. And we're going to dart this bear with what's known as a Dan inject system. These darts are air charged darts. They don't have any firing mechanism other than impact. So go to the back, and there's a one-way valve that'll keep the air in the dart. You just put as much air in there as you can. And that dart is ready to fire once we put a tailpiece on it. We're going to stay on this side of the electric fence. When we were over there, a lot of bears were interfering with our work, so we're going to stay on this side of the fence and try to see if we can get a shot this direction.
After another successful immobilization, bear number 2 is safely moved to her new exhibit, where hopefully she'll learn some manners about how to get along with other bears.
Animal health is always a priority. Has to be number one, because if we had no animals, there'd be no Bearizona. So it's obviously one of the most important things, and with animal health, it's one of those things that we always strive to be better. We know that there's things that work really well, but there's always things that we can learn more about and do better on. And so every day we try to always progress and make sure that if there's a new type of vaccine or some type of enrichment that we can give the animals, we try to give that to them.
A good example of this is the type of training the park's jaguar is receiving.
So with our jaguars, one of my favorites, his name is Bagheera. He's about 4 years old, and with Bagheera we do husbandry behaviors. So we train them to allow them to participate in their own care. So we reward Bagheera for first touching his nose to a target, and then when he holds his nose on it, we reward. And so now we're able to start moving Bagheera back and forth so we can examine his body for injuries. Teach him to stand up, clip his toenails, open up his mouth, stand on a scale, right? All behaviors that seem rather simple, but are all the most important ones for their care. Without training these behaviors, we would sometimes have to anesthetize these big animals, and some of the cats, like jaguars, don't always do that great when they're anesthetized. So what's much more safe is just train them to open up their mouths so we can just look at their teeth without having to put them to sleep.
There are about 180 animals at Bearizona. Some of them come from other accredited zoos or sanctuaries, but the majority are rescues that were confiscated after being taken illegally from the wild, or they had become so habituated to humans that they had to be removed.
One of my favorites, actually. We claim 50% rescue. It's actually higher than that. Most of our bears are rescue, a lot of rescue critters in the park. We love being able to take those guys in and give them a good home, large areas to move around in.
They would have been better off left in the wild, but due to human interference, feeding bears when you shouldn't be feeding bears, picking up what you think are orphaned animals and thinking you're doing them some kind of good, you're actually doing them a lot of harm. Once these animals get habituated to human life and even imprinted to human life, they cannot be put back out in the wild. They'll never make it. They have no natural instincts. And so these animals are destined to a life in captivity. And luckily, places like Bearizona have really catered to the need for those animals that would otherwise be stuck in small enclosures and small zoos somewhere.
Back out in the park, a Coues white-tailed deer named Fonzie needs to be immobilized to have his hoofs trimmed, but he's proven to be a challenge to dart.
This particular white-tailed deer has a certain aura about him that every time we try to do anything to him, he evades us, whether it be running away, missed shots. This is a perfect shot, hit him right in the rump where it's supposed to do, and we had a dart failure. So we'll come back and get him another day. What do you say? That's our only option.
That's our only option.
Because he's not going to let any vehicle get close to him at all today.
Not anymore.
The next day, the vet team finally gets their deer.
Got him. Well, it's about time. I'll tell you, this deer is a spirit deer. We finally got a dart in him.
It only takes a few minutes before Fonzie is fast asleep and can be moved to the triage area. In the wild, deer basically run for a living, so their hoofs wear down naturally. But in captivity, they need an occasional trimming. They also check the young buck for any other medical needs.
So once we got this Coues whitetail down, we found that it had a significant laceration on its left stifle. We're going to do a little wound debridement and get the tissues freshened up and cleaned up and help this wound heal a little bit faster. All right, that wound will heal in about a week to 10 days. We just gave him a drug to wake him back up, so we're just waiting for that drug to take effect. Attaboy! Woohoo!
Oh, good job.
Oh, Fonzie, no driving for the next 8 hours.
Dr. Ole makes the rounds to check up on several other smaller animals, including a pair of baby otters who were rejected by their mother. They have to be hand-fed 5 times a day by the very patient animal care staff, but otherwise they appear healthy.
I get a great deal of satisfaction working on animals that, are extremely challenging. A domestic animal can't tell you what's wrong. Try applying that same science to wildlife.
Bearizona is spread out over 160 acres, and visitors can drive through more than 3 miles of ponderosa pine forest viewing North American animals in natural habitats. More animals are exhibited in a 20-acre walkthrough area that's more of a typical zoo-like setting.
Educating guests about it, what it's like to live with bears in your yard, or javelina, right? How to take the dog food off your back porch so that the animals aren't eating it at night is going to keep more animals from coming to places like Bearizona. And don't get me wrong, I love the fact that I get to work with these animals, but what would be even better is if they were all able to live out in the natural environments like they were meant to. What's neat though on top of that is that our environment here for these bears is about as natural as they can get. So it's education because of that is my number one.
We'll get to fishing, guys. I mean, I'm pretty excited. Hopefully you guys will see some big fish today. Absolutely. You good?
More or less.
More or less.
Today we're at Saguaro. It's a beautiful lake out here in the East Valley. We're just trying to catch some yellow bass today.
That's it, isn't it? I mean, fishing has a huge part of my life as well as Dylan's, and it would be like, I feel like I'd be missing a part of myself if fishing wasn't involved in my life. It's pretty much all of my being.
When we were casting towards that buoy is where you're getting them on this side, like straight to it. This is like my time that I just drop everything else and just zone into what I'm doing out here, and it's my favorite thing to do.
It becomes more than fishing. It's more of like a connection and a value to yourself. All right, guys, we just got our first fish of the day. Today we're out here fishing for these little yellow bass for our cooking section of today's episode. This guy's a little too small to keep for the fillets, but it is a fish, so it's promising. Shows that they're out there biting, so it should be a pretty good day.
It's just a lot of fun to catch these little guys, no matter how big they are. They slam it and they eat it. When they eat it, they want it, so it's a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, you nailed it, man. Straight out at the buoy. Ooh, wow, look at this guy. Wow, look at his back. It looks like something took a bite out of him. Like he just took his fin right off. Yeah, that is crazy. He taught me at a young age, which is really cool because most kids are sitting inside playing video games and watching TV, and it was really cool to get outside and experience what it's like outside and just learning a lot of life lessons and values and morals. I mean, there's much more to fishing than just catching the fish. When I started fishing, there wasn't really a whole lot of people that made a lot of videos, so I thought it would be really cool to make videos to teach people.
It's always a goal to try to catch fish, but the very first thing that we try to do every single day is make sure that we have fun. Because if we're out here and we're not having fun, there's no point in doing it.
Working it pretty quick too, so I mean, they're moving around. So they're letting water in.
I don't like to associate myself with like the whole millennial thing, because it's kind of a stigma on it. Like, oh, they don't do anything, oh, they're just complaining about everything. And I really don't like that.
That's what we're after, right?
Yeah.
So I thought it'd be really cool to make videos and just kind of be the one to teach other people, and especially being younger, I can reach a really cool audience and kind of spread that to that younger age group.
I'm excited to see what my generation can do with this. I think that we can take it to a whole nother level.
Did you know that there are more than 330 hummingbird species, most of them living in Central and South America, and only a handful live in the United States? You can see a total of 15 species right here in Arizona. In fact, some have called southern Arizona the hummingbird capital of the United States.
Hummingbirds, I think they're charismatic. Everybody loves hummingbirds.
Maybe it's because these winged wonders seem so magical.
They're a small bird, so we're looking at something that's 3 grams. They are so tenacious. I like to say that if they were any larger, we couldn't live on the same planet with them. Hummingbirds are actually the only bird that can truly hover for periods of time. And they really have such a unique way of moving their wings like this. If we can really slow it way down, you'll see. And they can also migrate so far from Alaska all the way to Mexico. That is crazy.
Their wings beat 70 times a second, and they can eat over twice their weight in nectar and flying insects every day.
They do have a very, very high metabolism rate. So they have to be, they're on the go looking for nectar and looking for that occasional little bit of food that we might put out, which is the sugar water to help them out.
Tucson's Arizona Sonoran Desert Museum has a hummingbird aviary, and there you can see some of these wondrous little creatures up close. The exhibit is so popular that they decided to put the hummingbirds up for adoption, with all the proceeds going towards caring for them and other animals at the museum.
We decided to ask our Facebook community if you could adopt any animal or plant at the Desert Museum, what would it be? And we got a huge response, and the landslide winner was the hummingbird. So with this symbolic adoption program, you can adopt one of our hummingbirds. It's a one-time fee, and it's a way to connect you to our hummingbirds. Both levels also come with a fun fact sheet, so you can learn everything you'd ever want to know about these winged wonders we have here.
Spring is a great time to see hummingbirds, but summer, especially in southern Arizona, is the place to be if you're on the lookout for these amazing little birds.
At the Arizona Game and Fish Department, we strive to conserve and protect Arizona's wildlife and wildlife habitat resources. Until next time, I'm Jamie Lyons, and remember to get out there and enjoy those Arizona wildlife views.
To subscribe to Arizona Wildlife Views magazine, which includes the Arizona Wildlife Views calendar, call 1-800-777-0015 or visit www.azgfd.gov/magazine.